Good morning, everybody. Thank you for coming to listen to me chat this morning. One trademark of a spiritualist is they can talk unending. You get two of us together and we'll talk till sundown. The problem is trying to keep it focused on the same subject, so I'll try to do that today. This morning I'm going to talk on the religion of spiritualism, its key points, and a little bit about how and why the religion was formed. If you're interested, there's some of these on that back glass case over there that summarizes basically what I'm going to talk about. In the beginning, spiritualism was something that, well, there's several different ages to spiritualism. After the pioneers, there comes a time called the modern spiritualism. Modern spiritualism is the era that we're in now. It came about because people began to, in the pioneers of spiritualism, they traveled around the country demonstrating mediumship, demonstrating healing, demonstrating the different aspects of which became the religion later on. They began to be publicly attacked by the scientists, the religious groups, and even the government after a while, because they were creating such a disruption back in the 1800s when they organized and began to actively reach outward. As a result of this, the actual first group of organized spiritualists was in New York, and it was a group of psychologists and scientists, believe it or not. And they were investigating all of this phenomenon that had been going on for years by individuals. And so they came together to find the worth of it. And in that era also, the United States government appropriated $1,100 to research the phenomenon of spiritualism. Back in the 1800s, that was quite a bit of money. It's fair enough money now, but it was a lot of money back then. So they finally came together, started organizing, and their purpose was to answer the questions that were not directly answered by organized religions. They were intending to help or to augment the organized religions of the day. And when they began speaking those spiritually received truths, they were, like I said, ostracized. Most of the original organizers of spiritualism in the United States, the same thing happened to them that happened to the founding fathers of our country. They ended up destitute, bankrupt, and disgraced by the public. But they still pushed forward and organized this. We basically draw to 9 principles that we state at the beginning of every church service. These were put together, the first 6 of them were put together by the National Spiritualist Association of Churches to define what the religion was, how we believe God is, how we believe that we interact with the heavenly spheres. The last 3 were developed to explain the outer expression of the religion to the people around us as a religion. So if you take time to read those, it's kind of, I'm not going to go into that today because that's not what part of the talk is, but it is part of the talk, I guess, because what is unique about our principles is that they are read by the individual, they are interpreted by the individual, and they are practiced the way that that individual feels it affects them in their lives. Our principles are suggested guidelines. They're not commandments written in stone. So when you read these, and the reason we feel like that as an organization and as a faith is because everybody evolves. Their understanding evolves of what they read, what they're exposed to, their expression of their religious understanding and spiritual understanding broadens as they get older, as they get more introduced to it, and as they ponder the different things that it says. And I know that for a fact because when I first came out here, I was given a book called Becoming a Spiritualist by H. Gordon Burroughs. And it was a used book, and my CE had given it to me to study, and she had underlined different passages in it and highlighted them. And they didn't mean that much to me. But other passages that weren't underlined did. So I put little hash marks by them so I could remember what had impressed me by the reading. And basically this is a living text because, again, it's got, as your expression broadens and understand more, you're impressed by different things and what they say. So I highlighted those things myself, marked them, and a year later I went back and read the book again, and they weren't the ones that impressed me. Other ones were. So I know from personal experience that people's understanding of their religious belief about themselves changes and expands, as well as the written text that you read. That's why we say they're suggested guidelines. So as you read anything that comes from spiritualism, it's something that was tranced down, it's something that was given to the earthly plane by the spirit forces, observed, practiced, and found to be true, and put into the religion. That's where all of our sayings, all of our principles, everything we do comes from. So read it with that in mind when you read the literature you're exposed to. Basically, what I gotta get the bigger copy. My over 40 eyes don't like to read the small copies anymore. As the religion began to be formed more, like I said, it fell to the purview of religious groups. And the main difficulty with spiritualism being organized into a religion is that it was never intended to be a religion. It was intended to be a way of living given to people from spirit inspiration. But again, they had to do it to protect themselves, to make themselves viable. And in the UK, they had a witchcraft act on their law books until the 1960s. So after it was organized here, it was taken to the UK, and it is a religion that is indigenous to America. I can't think of too many others that are. Well, I guess the Mormons are, but we are an indigenous religion to the United States. So they went overseas, and the same thing happened to them over there. They were jailed. They were penalized, they were ostracized, until finally the public grew so supportive of it that they came up, and spiritualism in the UK was the only religion known that was created by an act of Parliament. So they came out and they said what mediumship and spiritualism was specifically and what it wasn't, because they weren't allowed to foretell the future. They weren't allowed to give messages from the spirit side of life. All they were allowed to do was give evidence of survival of the grave. And it was still like that pretty much when I went over there in the 90s. Evidence of survival of the grave. Tremendous evidence, phone numbers, addresses, very specific, very detailed information. But what a friend of mine told me when me and my wife demonstrated over there, because we do like we do here, we give a message from the loved one at the end of it. He said, it's refreshing to see that kind of demonstration. He says, because you go to the churches around here, how many times can you hear evidence about your dad with no communication and it means something? He said, after a while, the newness wears off and all you're hearing is facts and figures. But I learned how to do what I do at the Arthur Findlay College, and they were teaching it there, how to bring the presence of the Spirit through. So they evolved, just like I said. Spiritualism understands that it's an evolutionary thing. But they were teaching us how to bring the Spirit through our mediumship and let it live with the group of people before us, not just the individual who bring it through, but broadcast it to the group and allow the people here to feel the presence of the Spirit if they don't know the Spirit. And it was kind of funny, a little segue. I was at the college, and they had this big auditorium, not that big, it's about like this, and it holds about 150 people. First day of school class, everybody's there, 150 people, and the guy organized it was a man by the name of Simon James, and he's well known throughout the UK, and I got to know him pretty well myself. He says, he asked me to get up there. I'd studied with him a couple of years before. He said, he didn't ask me to get up there, he said, who here considers themselves a spiritualist? And out of 150 people, 5 people raised their hands. And he says, that's interesting. You're coming to a spiritualist college to study spiritual mediumship, and you don't consider yourself a spiritualist. So it was kind of an odd mix of people. And he says, I need 2 people to get up here and do a demonstration so I can show you what we're going to do this week in the college. Nobody get up there. 150. Now, at the college, it's not just students. It's practicing mediums from all over the world. It's not just people trying to learn how to do it. It's people that do it professionally and come there for further instruction. So it's quite a crowd of people there. Nobody wanted to get up there. Nobody wanted to be, have themselves put under the microscope, I guess. And finally, this little girl down front, she raised her hand. She says, "Well, I'm only a student, but I'll get up there." And I thought a minute, and I stood up. I said, "Well, by God, I flew all the way here from the United States. I get up there too." So she gets up there first and does a beautiful message, evidence right down the line, proof of survival, everything. And then I get up there and I do what I do. And Simon looks at me and he looks to the crowd and he goes, "Now look at Steve here." He said, "Steve, I haven't seen you work in a couple of years." He said, "You're really something." He said, "You go straight to the Spirit and begin to give this evidence." And I'm sitting there smiling. I think I'm being complimented, And he says, "But where was the Spirit?" He said he does this beautiful checklist of evidence, and everything's correct, but it's just this checklist. He says, where was the living presence of the Spirit? And so that's what they were teaching us, is how to bring it in, broadcast it out, as well as to go to the person and give evidence. So it's inclusive of all the people around. It was just interesting to see, again, how the religion and mediumship itself progresses and unfolds as it goes along. Now, to the spiritualist faith, healing and mediumship demonstrate parts of the religion. They are not the religion. And unfortunately, a lot of the time, that's what people get drawn to. They see the phenomenon, they want to sit and become a medium, they want to sit and become a healer, and they have no idea what part of the philosophy that is demonstrating. And it says that we give proof of our beliefs, and that's what healing and mediumship is proof of our beliefs, not our beliefs. Mediumship proves the eternal life on the other side of life, and that the continuity of life, and that we continue after we die. That's what they say. It proves it, but I say it demonstrates it pretty good, because it's hard to prove things to some people. And the other thing with healing is that it actually demonstrates the presence of God or an infinite spirit, as spiritualists say it, because it is a benevolent. It can change cellular structure. It can change the physical existence of organic beings through healing, which is beyond medical science. So this proves a greater intelligence than is here on the earth, i.e. God or infinite spirit, and it acts in a benevolent fashion towards us because it produces healing. And that's what our teaching is that God is a benevolent being towards the earth. Some of what I'm going to say and going on may contradict that a little bit, but it's all part of the philosophy. Some of the main points of spiritualism is that we do not profess to our membership a specific idea of God. And the reason we don't do that is because religion encourages people to have a personal experience with God, to meditate, to draw direct communication from the mind of God to them. And with that relationship, you run your life. We don't run your life as a religion. You run your life, and you are responsible for the decisions you make. Now, we, having walked this road before, may have certain things we can give to you, certain things we can share with you to help you with your life. But you run your life based on your personal experience with God. The other part of that is we have no claim of exclusivity, which means we are the way. And I know any of us that came up in Orthodox religions heard that from the people there. We believe that we are a way, not the way. And within that, we also find truth in all other religions. We feel just like with healing, with religion is the same. Different dances to the same music, infinite spirit or God, all takes you to the same place. Different personalities, different belief systems, all that attracts a specific kind of person that works through their development stages to get to where they're going. The only thing I would say, and I see this happening a lot with spiritualism, is people bring in their old beliefs with them rather than embracing the newer beliefs and a progressive belief. They want to bring in different things. Some people want to bring in the concept of Jesus Christ, and I'll speak about that a little bit because we do believe in Jesus Christ, just not the way the Christians do. They want to bring in reincarnation, which is a great science and is true, but not part of our development process. We have a different approach to personal and spiritual development than embracing the philosophy of reincarnation. And again, we don't disallow people to believe this way or even talk that way within our churches. It's just as a spiritualist, we have proven techniques to move forward with our own personal and spiritual development that pretty much should kind of try to be adhered to, because within Orthodox religions, they have a progression and it moves you towards spiritual awakening. The same way with spiritualism. It moves you towards a spiritual awakening of yourself. So in each of these different organizational groups have a specific sequential awakening process. And if you go halfway through one, jump to the other, you've kind of skipped some of the processes of either one of them. So my encouragement would be give one of them a chance. Take it all the way to the hilt. And if it doesn't keep progressing, then it's not for you. But again, we don't say that we're better than any other religion. We just have a way to do this. And that's why we have no claim of exclusivity. But also, the other part of that is that we have no doctrine of conversion either, because we allow people to come to us to get information from us in the fashion that we think that they're looking for. So we speak to people. We don't go out and actively try to convert people or however. People come to us. Our religion is not a Savior God-based religion. What that means is that we don't believe any intermediary between us and infinite intelligence or God. Again, as I said earlier, we encourage a personal development with God and develop that personal relationship to move yourself forward. So there is no, and within that, I'll speak a moment about Jesus Christ as well as all the other saviors that are recorded throughout whatever history you choose to look at. We do believe in all of these saviors, that they were there at that time. Our philosophy just doesn't cause us to necessarily only see the divinity of these people. It allows us to see the humanity of these people, how they struggled on earth, how they had challenges on earth, just like we do, even though they were a very divine person. All of them had very developed spiritual gifts, healing, prophecy, different things like that. The bringing back from the dead people, things like that. We believe that these are naturally developed spiritual gifts, but we don't feel that those are the only people that could ever develop them. So we don't have this savior that goes to God for us. But again, the people that have that belief, it works well for them. My whole family's, Christian. And it works well for them. They're good people. They do good things. It guides them through their times of toil and trouble. So I'm not trying to put down any religion, but by what I'm saying, I'm just trying to emphasize who we are as a religion. There is no concept of hell or the devil in our religion. Within saying that, it's not that we don't believe in evil. We just don't believe in a deity that projects evil and makes you do things that you shouldn't do. You are responsible by personal responsibility for everything you do, every time you say it, no matter why you do or say it. That's the truth of your relationship with the infinite intelligence. And there's no deity out there that has more power than you as a spirit. So we don't believe in this overall demonic presence that causes people to be evil, that causes people to do things they shouldn't. Our idea is that the struggle between good and evil is that you have a basic animal instinct within your body by being biologically born here. That those instincts, when not tempered by spiritual consciousness, gets to be just like an animal in the field. Kills, murders, rapes, just does all kinds of stuff that is not guided or tempered by a spiritual consciousness and direct communication with God. So we do believe in evil, but our primary idea of evil is the struggle between the spiritual person you are and the natural animal person you are through your instincts. That's a pretty simplistic explanation of mass murderers and some of the most horrible people that we can read about in history, but the basic dynamics is why that is, because the greater your consciousness is to spiritual awakening, it's almost impossible for you to do those things. You can't bring yourself to do it. You just can't make those decisions to do that. So, and even on a minor scale, people that are bullies, people that tend to be a little bit rough around the edges, same thing with them. They have not embraced or had a spiritual awakening about their true spiritual nature within them. And I've already spoke about this one. Our principles and guidelines are open to the individual's interpretation as they're able to put them into action in their lives. One of my favorite sayings is turning spiritual knowledge into spiritual wisdom. We sit in classes out here and have all kinds of instruction of a very good nature, very high nature by some really qualified people. And we're sitting here and hearing all this stuff, and boy, that's really interesting. That's when it's at the knowledge state. Wisdom is when you go out into life and you begin to live it, and you have to tailor it or amend it to be able to manage it out in the real world. I mean, you can believe in the goodness of people all you want, but if you walk down the wrong side of town at midnight, something bad might happen to you, because again, it falls back to spiritual, personal responsibility. So you have to be able to connect to this and move forward with it in a responsible sense. The personality survives intact in a living and conscious form immediately upon the change called death. That's what mediumship demonstrates. We believe that you immediately transition to the other side. There is no waiting, there is no time out, for lack of a better term, of what happens. And whether you believe in the hall of judgment when you go to the other side, or you believe in standing in judgment before the presence of God, or however you believe that accounting is done, there is an accounting for your life, what you've done and how you've done it, without the ability to justify, without the ability to reason or argue. You see it in the true light of truth, and that causes your soul to radiate at a certain harmonic rate. Through that awakening, through that attunement of what you've done and how you've done it, is what you can see on the other side of life. What you understand happens on the other side of life. And you still have to go through bad news, you still have to go through work over there, probably even more so, because spiritual law and natural law has no buffer of the physical world between it and you over there. It's almost immediate consequences, immediate things that happen to you based on your decisions, based on your actions. And saying decisions and actions indicates that you have a physical body and brain over there, but you don't. These are just concepts of the energy and how it works over there. So as you progress through that side of life, you also begin to greater awarenesses. Communication with those who have passed over is possible through the gift of mediumship. That's another belief you should have if you're trying to embrace spiritualism. Now, I know when I first came out here, that's what I was told. We proved the continuity of life after death, and it took me a while to figure that out, because I didn't quite see it a lot of the times. And again, I'm just coming out of a pretty difficult time in my life. I'd say I was backing out of hell, not climbing towards grace. So it was had a little bit of a difficult view, but it took me a while to get to the point to agreeing to that. So again, these are guidelines. These aren't written in stone principles. It's not that you can't be a spiritualist if you don't absolutely fall down and swear that these are all true. Our concepts are demonstrated and do not require being accepted on faith. And that's what it goes back to. Mediumship and healing are demonstrations of the religion. They are not the religion. So as you can, and this pamphlet here has a greater description of all of these in the back, so take your time and read it. Some of the objectives of spiritualism are as follows. To practice and teach the truths and religions expressed in the Declaration of Principles and the definition of spiritualism, spiritualist, a medium, and a healer. To demonstrate the truths of science, philosophy, and religion of modern spiritualism. That's something I didn't talk about too much because it is a science, a philosophy, and a religion. It's a science because it investigates and categorizes the phenomenon that it sees and practices. It's a philosophy because, as I said, there is this guiding principle. That was primarily what I was talking about before, was the philosophy of spiritualism. And it's a religion because it's organized by people. It's organized and proposed outwardly. In the United States, it's kind of funny because a lot of people want to know how the Bible got connected to spiritualism. And there's a little bit of history to that. In the old days, they used to say in parts of the country, they said that a lot of the spiritualists were breakaway Methodists because the Methodists believe in stigmata, the bleeding of the hands, and the demonstration of the crucifixion. They speak in tongues, which is similar to our mediumship. So it was not that difficult for them to make the transition over to some of the principles that I've been describing. Promote and support lectures on all subjects pertaining to the spiritual and secular welfare of mankind. That's something that we actually had a discussion of that not too long ago at one of our meetings. And there was a discussion about what mediums should be using, what mediums they shouldn't be using, what we should be teaching and what we shouldn't be teaching. And that right there, I quoted that right there. You're supposed to investigate and promote that which is of use to the humankind in progressing. And again, that's part of the evolution of spiritualism, where we try to add to it, take away things that aren't effective. I remember when I first came out here, the old spiritualists, and I hate saying that because I'm 70 now myself, but back then I wasn't. I was one of the young pups coming out here. They used to teach that when you went to the other side of life, and this was a very common teaching throughout all of spiritualism, it wasn't just here. But what I was taught here was when you go to the other side of life, you get a set of spirit clothes, and children grow up and when children die and go over there, they go over there as children and grow up in spirit. And they said that you live in villages with other spirits, and that was all fine and good because one of the greatest pioneers of this time was Andrew Jackson Davis. And he had a lot of very profound things to say. That's who the building up there is named after. But there was a lot of profound things that he did say that we have incorporated into our religion. But other parts of his writing talked about a colony living on the backside of Mars and living on the moon and things like that. So we're pretty sure that doesn't happen now because of all the explanation we've done. But back then, that was part of the philosophy. It's graduated from worshiping things in nature as deities and gods to what it is today. But those types of progressions are what we've been through with this particular aspect here. But we are supposed to support subjects that promote secular welfare and the advancement of the humankind. And as I said, we set aside teaching that tend to not prove to be effective for our time. I won't say untrue, because they prove not to be effective. And that thing about children going to spirit as children is still held to a certain extent by some people. I personally had an experience with my mediumship here in this very room that demonstrated that was not true to me. And it was during a message service, and I brought through a woman's child during a 3-year-old child that had drowned in her backyard, in her pool. And the child came to me, I described the child, and then it appeared as a full-size spirit, a regular adult spirit. And the woman was in tears, and she said, "Why did that happen? Why did that happen to us?" And the Spirit said to me to tell her that her family had the love that I needed to go through what I needed to when I was there, and I thanked them for that. So this proved to me that you, regardless of your biological age, have a fully developed spiritual being from the other side of life that is with you. And that comes right into something that I talk about in my classes a lot, is that people want to be mediums, they want to be healers, but they can't even communicate with their own spiritual being that is the eternal part of them. So within that, you should take time to try to communicate with that spiritual being, because that spiritual being can give you as much guidance as a guide that's outside of you, and maybe not the mind of God, but it's quite powerful with its influence and its knowledge of your life. It knows your eternal life. It knows what you've been, where you're going. I mean, it's a pretty powerful thing to try to communicate with. It's just that we have a hard time trusting ourselves or believing in ourselves when we do that. So it's a pretty tough thing to get to do. But the other religions I came up through taught you how to do that, personal development, rather than outer development of a craft or a skill with the religion. They promoted inner development first. And a lot of organizations have that. Any 12-step organization has that inner development until you have a spiritual awakening and get past what you're trying to get past. So these kinds of things are kind of interesting to think in your mind and ponder at times in your meditation. Ensure personal religious freedom and stand against every attempt to compel mankind to worship God in any particular or prescribed manner. Demonstrate the practice and gifts of mediumship and healing. To protect and encourage spiritual teachers and mediums in laudable efforts of demonstration of the truths of healing and continued communication between the spirit realm and now. To encourage every person in holding present beliefs always open to restatement as growing thought and investigation reveals understanding of new truths, thereby leaving every individual free to follow the dictates of reason and conscience in spiritual as in secular welfare. So as a result, we don't usually take a stance on political issues. We don't encourage people to vote in the political way. That statement there is a little bit, was amended a little bit by the women's suffrage movement, because a lot of spiritualists were involved in the women's suffrage movement, which they did get behind in full force. Some of the books that it says here, this is a pretty big one, it's about that thick. The History of Spiritualism by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. The Nsac Spiritualist Manual. If you can get that, it's a little black book. I think I got one in my briefcase. It's a compilation of all services that you should perform, of inspirational sayings. It's basically a handbook to be used by spiritualists to organize meetings when there's no church or any organized structure around them. Somebody like me, a minister, takes it. That's our handbook for performing services. It has bereavement ceremonies in there, marriage ceremonies. It's got a lot of principles about the spiritualist faith in there. If you understand half of that book, you'll understand as much, if not more, than I do about the spiritualist faith. So it's a pretty nice book, and it's usually not too expensive. Becoming a Spiritualist by H. Gordon Burroughs. Now that's a pretty interesting book, because it was written by a Theosophist, not a spiritualist. H. Gordon Burroughs ran the Theosophical Society for a while, and For those of you that don't know the Theosophical Society, it was a worldwide group, and it established colleges, it established tremendous organization backgrounds, a lot of different things, but they had a bit of a difficulty at one time, probably about the 1940s or 50s, when their savior, for lack of a better term, Krishnamurti, came into fruition in the public eye. He was considered to be, he was raised from childhood in the Theosophical philosophy, and he was taught everything there was to teach, and he's supposed to be the diviner of the spiritual intention for the group, the top dog. And he came out, and what the theosophy, part of what theosophy says is that there's spirit teachers in spirit that guide the path of the human race on earth, and there's the same group of teachers physically here on the earth doing it. That's what one of their teachings said. And Krishnamurti said, well, that just isn't exactly true. You may or may not meet him. So that took a lot of steam out of them for some reason, because a lot of people, that's their whole drive, was to get to meet the teachers here, on this earth that are guiding the human race. But that kind of took the steam out of their sail. But H. Gordon Burroughs wrote a beautiful book on it, and I'm sure they have it up in the bookstore, and it's called Becoming a Spiritualist. And so again, it's kind of like what I was saying before. It's a living text. If you highlight what impresses you now more than the rest of the book, a year from now, other parts of it will and those parts won't. So it's a living text, and it's a very interesting read. It's usually short subjects. You don't have to read 10 pages to reach a conclusion. It's very easy reading, so I'd suggest that you get one of those. And spiritualism, for me personally, has taught me, it's given me guidance where nothing else has. Within spiritualism, I've come to have a relationship with God, and God guides me at different times. And I found out that God doesn't always guide you gently. Sometimes it's a pretty hard push in a direction that you don't want to go, that you have chosen not to go, but it's indispensable to your spiritual development that you go through it. And it just keeps ending up in your area to be dealt with again and again and again until you do. So God sometimes uses, and I should be saying infinite spirit, because God has a connotation to it that a lot of people misrepresent in the relationship to spiritualism. But God will use anything to move you on your path. There's an analogy that I love that was given to me in one of my classes. Spiritualism views the human race as you would view a stream running down a hillside. If you're standing there looking at this stream, the water in the middle is being driven surely, clearly, without impediment back to the source, which is gravity pulling it downhill. If you liken God to that gravity, it's an irresistible, inextricable force that acts on you, whether you choose to participate in it or not. There's that drawing, driving force from the greater intelligence, infinite intelligence, or God, that is drawing you back to your spiritual home through your trials and tribulations down here. So the middle of the stream is the people that are on the path every day, consciously doing it, and consciously engaged with their lives and spiritual development. As you move outward, the stream tends to run a little slower. These are people that are having difficulty, that are on the fence, that aren't quite sure, that are making progress, but grudgingly. And then you see the swirls by the stream side where they look like they're running back on themselves, just running in circles. But if you look at that closely, if a leaf or a twig gets in there, it runs around in a few circles and then gets back out into the stream. So even people that look like they're running in circles in their lives are equally pulled by the force of God. It's just that their conscious involvement in it isn't as good as other people's. But that force of God draws on you whether you acknowledge it, accept it, or want it there. It is an irrefutable natural law that moves your life. So, anybody have any questions? We got about 5 minutes before we close up
I
here.
have one from online.
Okay.
They're asking what university were you referring to that you went for that session?
It's called the Arthur Findlay College, and it's in the United Kingdom. It's a world college on mediumship, and they teach in 7 different languages there. So if you choose to go, make sure you speak the language it's being taught in. It's one of the things I can tell you. And it's a place where your fee includes all the courses, food, and lodging. So it's a wonderful place to go. It's a cloistered atmosphere of people of like mind, and you'd be sitting it's wonderful. You sit in the dining room, and there'll be 10 or 15 people. You sit at the same table every day. They want you to sit there, and you hear this person speaking to this one in French, this one answering in German, and this one answering back in Italian, understanding what they're saying. So it's a wonderful melting pot. And they all speak English too, so it's kind of nice. But it's a great atmosphere to be in, just that so charged, and the best teachers in the world. They're kind but firm, and they will move you forward with your mediumship. They don't gently encourage you. You pay a lot of money, come over there, and it's just a wonderful atmosphere. Yes.
You mentioned so eloquently the religions and how spiritualism really sort of encompasses and accepts every religion. My question is, almost every religion has a sect of mysticism, and I'm curious if you are born into a religion. I'd like to believe that's the divinity of it. The choice was made for you. Would you recommend then going in the path of that religion? So, for example, I was born into Judaism, and we have the Kabbalah. So in my path of finding spiritualism, I'm seeking. Would I be then encouraged maybe to seek within that religion? Because after all, I was born into that, so that the mysticism part of it is spirituality.
Well, again, your relationship with God and what God inspires you to do is not something I want to amend. All I can do is share with you common experiences of mine or other people that I've known. The religion that I was brought up in was Roman Catholic, and there's wonderful parts to it, and I loved it. I almost became a priest at one time, and I loved what it did. I loved what it taught, but I hit a point at some point in my life where it stopped propelling me forward. It stopped answering the questions that I had, and that's why I changed faiths. I changed to almost not quite Buddhism. It was Kundalini yoga taught by Sikhs with a Buddhist background. I went through that for 5 or 6 years. So what I would say to you is, don't throw away what is comfortable to you about what you came up in. It's all got truth in it. That's one of the things I said. We believe all religions have truth, but spiritualism has a specific way of unfoldment that you and God and whatever the suggestions of the text are to move you forward. And you're going to reach certain points within that system, as with any religious system, where you have to make huge personal decisions about yourself and about your beliefs. And when that comes, you have to progress through that rather than step aside from it or put something in. Well, this religion over here says this, and I kind of like that. That's what I was talking about before. You'll naturally progress. There's no need to tear down what supported you for a good portion of your life or think less of it. My mom came out here and saw me ordained in this church here, and she's a devout Catholic. My whole family came. They're all Catholics. And the one woman came up to my mom. I heard her ask her, "Oh, don't you think this is such a great place and great thing?" She says, "Actually, I don't believe in much of this, but I believe in what that religion has done for my son where nothing else could." So each faith has its unfoldment. Each faith has the challenges that you have to face. And that's the only reason I said that, not to commingle the two religions. The other thing that I failed to mention real quickly before I run out of time is the development style. I've spoken a little bit about that of spiritualism. There are 3 basic types of development for religious approach in the world: singular, which means that I, myself, am my only authority about what I do and what I believe, and I don't take any influence from anything else. The second one is a subjective form of approach. Now, this is the way the religions are given to people, not the way people themselves take on. This is the way it's taught to people. Subjective development means that you confine your beliefs to a specific text or form of things. Anything outside that text or that writing is not accepted, and you're not allowed to think that way. The third type is called co-development, which is where spiritualists come in. We believe that my interaction with God, my interaction with you, my interaction with the spirit realm brings to me what I need to progress. It's called co-development. And that's primarily what most spiritualists embrace is what that's called. So I hope I answered your question. Thank you. Anybody else for it's about time to close up here? Yes.
If the soul, if there is no reincarnation after death, and after death the soul, how does the soul then progress higher? What form does that reincarnation take?
I didn't say there wasn't reincarnation. I get that all the time. When I say we don't employ reincarnation as our belief system, everybody thinks we don't believe. We believe in reincarnation just like we believe in Jesus Christ. But we don't use those philosophies as part of our religious progression or how we proceed towards spiritual development. Reincarnation, belief in reincarnation is a religion of itself. And I know quite a bit about it, but it's not how we progress. Theosophists who believe in reincarnation say that if the whole world was spiritualists, they'd have a much better job. But the thing they take exception to as spiritualists is that we sit for development of psychic gifts. They think that it only progresses naturally through many lifetimes. So they have a bone to pick with us about that. But with reincarnation, the same thing. It's truth. It's true. Reincarnation is true, but we don't embrace that. We don't embrace the beliefs of the Muslim faith. We don't embrace the beliefs of the Christian faith. But all those can lead people to awareness. But we have our own path to personal development that doesn't include the philosophy of that. Doesn't mean we don't believe it's true. We just don't incorporate those beliefs into our progression of our religion. So I hope that made it a little clearer, but I mean, saying that if you don't practice reincarnation, you can't believe in it. I mean, that's, again, we don't embrace a lot of other things from other religions. And reincarnation was basically a Buddhist belief. It's a part of the Buddhist religion. So it's not this standalone philosophy out there that defines itself. It's actually part of another religious faith. No.
Right? So how do the spiritualists feel your soul gains more knowledge than after death?
My belief, and if you ask 5 spiritualists this, you're going to get 5 different answers probably. But my belief is that when you go to the other side of life, you stand, at the beginning of the lecture I said you stand before some judgment about your life. And this judgment of what you do and how you did it is impressed on your eternal existence vibration. If you want to call it a soul, that's fine. It's impressed on that and that vibration is how you view the other side of life. And as you move through the challenges and what you go through, you still have to make, for lack of a better term, decisions and take actions that have consequences or benefits to them. And that's the same way you progress here. You still progress that way over there, but in a different energetic form. Okay, well, I'm kind of over time. Went real quick, Johnny.
The reason why I think everyone goes to heaven is because if you're evil here on planet Earth, if you're a murderer, you're a rapist, you're a counterfeiter, you're a total thief. If you're that type of person, there's something wrong with your brain, and it's not your fault. So who could possibly do that evil unless something is wrong with them? If something is wrong with them, it's not their fault. So everybody goes to heaven. See what I'm saying?
I said that to somebody one time when we were arguing the different religions. There one guy's telling the other, well, I'm going to heaven and you're not because I'm this faith and you're that faith. And I looked at them both and I said, if we all die at the same time, don't be startled if we're all three standing in the same place because we're all going to heaven. So, you know, and they were a bit shocked by that, but that's what I told them anyway.
And why would God make a place where it's burning in hell forever? You know, God is a little too smart for that, I think. Don't you think so?
Well, I don't embrace the concept of hell, that's for sure, because I said that earlier in the lecture and why. But people that believe in that have that dynamic in their being, and it causes them to come to enlightenment, believing that, practicing that, and progressing through that. So you can't really condemn or change, really comment too much on somebody else's belief, because that's how God and their relationship with God is moving them through their life. So there is no one way for everything. Thanks for your comments. Thanks for all you guys coming.